They never asked his name. They didn't need to. To them, he was just another quiet man standing at the edge of the room, holding a black notebook he never opened. The conference hall in downtown Chicago was filled with the low hum of certainty, glass walls, steel beams, soft lighting that made everyone look successful, even when they weren't. The kind of place where people spoke confidently because they believed the room belonged to them. He stood near the back, not because he was late, not because he was unsure, because he had learned long ago that standing in the center invited questions, and questions led to explanations, and explanations were unnecessary. His name was Evan Cole, but no one there knew that yet. Dace. The presentation had already begun. When he arrived, a senior partner from Halbrook Strategies was speaking, mid-40s tailored suit, effortless smile, the kind of man who had never been ignored in his life. A slide glowed behind him. Adaptive Market Realignment, Q4 Framework. Evan recognized the framework immediately. Not the title, not the font. The structure, the sequencing of risk compression, the staggered entry thresholds, the contingency loop built into the third phase. It was his work. Not borrowed, not inspired. Taken. Cleanly, silently, months ago. Because it didn't. He didn't blink faster, didn't tighten his jaw, didn't shift his weight. He simply listened. The partner continued, explaining how Halbrook had developed a proprietary approach to stabilizing distressed mid-cap acquisitions. Applause followed each confident pause. Evan wrote nothing down. He already knew what came next. 6 months earlier, Evan had sat in a very different room. No glass walls, no steel beams, just a long table with chipped edges and a projector that hummed too loudly. It was an internal pitch meeting. Evan had spoken for exactly 12 minutes. Not rushed, not rehearsed, precise. He had walked them through the same framework now being praised on a 40-foot screen. He had explained where traditional firms failed: overconfidence, delayed pivots, emotional attachment to sunk costs. He had shown them how to strip ego out of the equation. When he finished, the room had been quiet, not impressed quiet, dismissive quiet. Then came the questions. Not about the idea, about him. Have you ever led a turnaround at this scale? Evan had answered, calmly, briefly. He had never exaggerated, never defended. He had simply stated facts. It hadn't helped. 2 weeks later, he was let go, not fired, restructured out, a polite phrase used when no one wanted to admit they hadn't listened. The exit interview had lasted 9 minutes. The HR representative had smiled apologetically and told him, "It's not about performance." Evan had nodded. He already knew. Back in the conference hall, the applause grew louder. The partner concluded with confidence, "We believe this approach positions Halbrook at the forefront of strategic recovery consulting." More applause. People leaned toward each other, whispering approval. Someone behind Evan muttered, "Brilliant." Evan didn't turn around. He didn't need to see their faces to know how the story would be told. After the presentation, attendees gathered in small clusters, business cards exchanged hands. Compliments were offered generously. Evan moved slowly, unnoticed. He stopped at a high table near the edge of the room and placed his notebook down, not to open it, but to mark the space. A woman approached him, late 30s, sharp eyes, no badge clipped to her jacket. "Interesting framework," she said. Evan looked at her. "Yes," he replied. That was all. She waited. People usually did, but Evan didn't fill silence. Eventually she smiled faintly. "I'm Mara Levine." She didn't extend her hand. She was watching him. "I know," Evan said. That caught her attention. "You funded Halbrook's Series C." A pause. "Recently," she said. "Yes." Another pause. "You don't seem impressed." "I wasn't the target audience." That earned a brief laugh. "Then why are you here?" Evan looked back toward the stage. "They wanted credit," he said. "I wanted timing." Mara studied him more carefully now. "What timing?" Evan picked up his notebook. "This framework fails. he said calmly. In volatile labor compressed markets. She frowned slightly. That wasn't mentioned. No, Evan replied. They won't see it until it's too late. And you will? I already have. Across the room, the Halbrook partner was shaking hands, basking in validation. He didn't see Evan. He never had. That would become a pattern. Mara leaned back against the table. You're very confident for someone standing alone. Evan met her gaze. I'm not confident, he said. I'm prepared. She considered that. Prepared for what? For when they call this a surprise. A beat. And when would that be? Evan glanced at his watch. 18 weeks. Mara's smile faded. Not in disbelief, but in calculation. That's specific. Yes. She studied him for a long moment. Who are you, Evan? He didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't know, but because names were currency, and timing mattered. Around them, the room buzzed with celebration. Halbrook was winning, at least on paper. Evan stood quietly at the edge, already several moves ahead. He had no intention of correcting anyone, no interest in reclaiming credit, no desire to be acknowledged, because in his experience, the most effective response wasn't confrontation. It was collapse. And collapse didn't require permission. They called it an anomaly. The first sign came quietly, not as a loss, not as a warning, as an explanation. 8 weeks after the conference, Halbrook's internal memo labeled it an irregular deviation. One of their newly acquired logistics firms had missed its performance targets by 6.2%. Not catastrophic, not alarming, just enough to require a footnote. The partner who had presented Evan's framework skimmed the report and moved on. Seasonal compression, he said. Temporary. Everyone agreed. They always did. Evan read the same numbers from a different location. A small office above a closed print shop on the south side. No logo on the door. No receptionist. Just a desk, a whiteboard, and 3 screens. He had leased the space 2 days after the conference. Not because he needed it, because it would exist on record. On his screen, the deviation wasn't 6.2%. It was phase 1. Labor compression had arrived earlier than projected. Exactly where he said it would. He updated a timeline on the whiteboard. Week 8, delay masked as variance. Week 11, margin stress disguised as supply noise. Week 14, executive denial. He capped the marker and sat back. Nothing to rush. At Halbrook, the second sign appeared as optimism. A junior analyst raised a concern during a Monday briefing. Our labor cost assumptions might be outdated, she said carefully. Turnover is accelerating faster than. The senior partner cut her off. We anticipated friction, he said. That's why the framework is resilient. He smiled. The room relaxed. No one asked where the framework came from. Evan was already on his second call of the morning. Not to Halbrook, not to their competitors, to their dependency. A regional freight subcontractor, a payroll compliance consultant, a mid-level operations director, who hadn't been promoted in 7 years. Evan didn't sell. He asked questions. Calm ones. Specific ones. What happens if overtime thresholds change mid-quarter? How flexible are your renegotiation windows? What's the real cost when morale drops below correction range? People answered. Not because he was persuasive. Because no one had asked them properly before. By week 11, the deviation had a new name. Market noise. Halbrook's internal update reframed the issue as external pressure, commodity fluctuations, temporary labor instability, unpredictable regional variance. It sounded professional. It was wrong. Mara Levine noticed the shift before the board did. Not because she was alarmist, because she had learned to listen when language changed. She requested a private briefing. The partner reassured her. We're seeing turbulence, he said. But the core model is sound. She nodded, then asked a single question. Who stress-tested the labor assumptions? A pause. We did, he replied. She didn't challenge him. She didn't need to. That night, Evan sent his first document. Not to Mara, to a third-party compliance firm Halbrook relied on. It wasn't a report. It was a question set. 17 items. All factual. All verifiable. None accusatory. The kind of questions that triggered audits without announcing them. Week 14 arrived on schedule. The collapse didn't. Yet. Instead, Halbrook held a press briefing. They announced confidence. They cited long-term positioning. They doubled down. Evan watched the live stream without sound. He wrote one word on the board. Acceleration. Internally, emails became sharper. Departments blamed timelines. Timelines blamed suppliers. Suppliers blamed policy shifts. No one blamed the model. Models didn't attend meetings. The first executive exit came quietly. A personal decision. The second followed 10 days later. Halbrook framed it as unrelated. The market disagreed. Stock dipped. Not dramatically. Enough to be noticed. Mara called Evan for the first time. I reviewed your assumptions, she said. They're unfolding exactly as you predicted. Yes. No satisfaction, she asked. Timing, Evan replied. A pause. You're not intervening. I am, he said. Indirectly. How long before they see it? They already do, Evan said. They just can't admit it yet. At Halbrook, the partner finally asked the question. No one wanted to ask. Who built this framework? The room went still. No one answered immediately. A junior associate spoke up. It was adapted from a pitch, she said carefully. From earlier this year. By whom? She hesitated, then said the name. Evan Cole. Evan Cole. Silence. Recognition arrived too late to be useful. Someone searched LinkedIn. The profile was sparse. No bitterness. No explanation. Just dates. And a quiet update from 3 weeks earlier. Founder Cole Advisory. The partner leaned back in his chair. We'll contact him, he said. But Evan didn't answer the email. Or the second. Or the third. Because by then, the framework wasn't the problem anymore. It was the exposure. And exposure was contagious. By week 17, Halbrook's largest client invoked a review clause. By week 18, the word surprise appeared in internal communications. Evan erased the whiteboard. All but one line. Collapse doesn't announce itself. It arrives already justified. Nothing collapses loudly. Halbrook never announced the failure. They renamed it. First it was a strategic recalibration. Then a portfolio realignment. Finally, a sunset initiative. Words were adjusted carefully. Numbers were not. By the time the board convened for the emergency session, the damage was already layered. Not one large loss, several small ones, each defensible on its own, irreversible together. The framework had done exactly what Evans said it would do. It amplified pressure instead of absorbing it. Labor costs surged. Turnover accelerated. Compliance audits froze renegotiations mid-cycle. The model couldn't pivot because it had been built on certainty. And certainty doesn't bend. Mara attended the board meeting remotely. She didn't speak until the end. When she did, she asked one question. Who understands this system well enough to unwind it? Silence. No one volunteered. They all knew the answer. Not because he was avoiding them, because he had already moved past the point where conversation mattered. Cole Advisory officially launched the following Monday. No press release. No announcement, just a filing update and 3 confirmed contracts, all from firms that had watched Halbrook closely. Not with excitement, with caution. Evan didn't poach clients. He didn't comment publicly. He didn't publish a post explaining what went wrong. He didn't need to. The market had already done the explaining for him. 6 weeks later, Halbrook sold off the division tied to the framework. At a loss, the partner resigned quietly. No scandal, no headlines, just a slow disappearance from rooms that had once applauded him. Mara met Evan in person for the first time 3 months after the conference. Same city, different room, no glass walls, no stage, just a table and 2 cups of coffee. They never acknowledged you, she said. Evan nodded. They never apologized either. He nodded again. And yet, she continued. You won. Evan didn't correct her. Winning wasn't the point. Accuracy was. She slid a document across the table. A long-term advisory agreement. No titles, no exclusivity, just leverage. He reviewed it once, signed up. Later that evening, Evan walked past the conference center. where it had started. Different event, different crowd, same certainty in the air. He didn't go inside. He had learned something important. The people who underestimate you rarely notice when they're no longer relevant. Halbrook's name still existed, on paper, but their authority did. And authority, once lost, doesn't announce its departure. It simply stops being consulted. Evan returned to his office. He opened the black notebook for the first time, wrote a single line, then closed it. The notebook went back into the drawer, unused again, because the story was complete, not because he had spoken, but because nothing more needed to be said.